know about our theater events. If you're new, these events are designed to offer opportunity to talk about the themes of the plays and other things that are relative to what we're exploring here on stage. And so today we are going to have a conversation about storytelling and theater. Whether one is the other and the other is the one, or something like that. And so I'm really honored today to have with us, first of all, many of you may have seen Kevin Kling in the show. Kevin Kling, I think, would think of himself as both storyteller and actor, theater person, right? And then joining us also is Adam Booth, who is the artistic director of Speak Story, which is a organization here that represents storytelling and invites storytellers from all over the world to come and be here as part of our community and share their stories with us. And Adam is an amazing storyteller in his own right. And these two have actually known each other for quite a while. Adam,
thank you. Thanks, Peggy.
so we want to start off by maybe asking the question, what is storytelling?
Are you asking us?
That's a good one. There's one way I'm gonna answer with a story, with a quick one.
Oh, well, this could be a
Yeah.
yeah.
And then we can jump off from here, because this isn't the whole answer, but this is the start of an answer. And I was in the outback of Australia, walking with a guy named Kling, who was an Atyamatya man, which meant his tradition probably went back between 30 and 60,000 years. And we're walking along, first of all, an emu runs by, which is a flightless bird, and he goes, fast food. And then he points to this mountain he called Eagle Mountain. And he told me the story of the eagle and his two nephews, the magpie and the crow. And in this 5-minute story, depending upon what your clan, your group was, your totem, however you wanted, your dreaming, all the different ways they have said, if you were of the eagle people, then you knew by those relationships who you could marry, where the eagle was thirsty, you could find water, you could find shelter, all these things, depending upon your age, your gender, your group, you could find out all this information in this 5-minute story, just about this Eagle Mountain. And what came to me then was our ancient stories, our first stories, when he said that we always think that they were to explain the mysteries. They weren't, they placed us within the mysteries. So we were using these stories to become part of this world we didn't understand. And so that to me is what a story really does. It doesn't really explain the answer, but it is a question. I just read a great quote. John Berger said, stories are battles and poems tend to the wounded. And I like that.
Adam, do you have anything to?
Well, it's been nice being here. I liked my present approach, which changes as I age and develop a different type of artistry in my own practice, and as I meet different storytellers. But the present approach is that storytelling is narrative conversation. And both of those elements are pretty important for my understanding of what storytelling is. It's narrative, I guess that's synonymous with story, telling a story, but there is a narrative in there. There's elements that we look for of character and moving through normalcy and action to get to hopefully some sort of problem or tension that we work through. But it's conversation, and it's in a over the dinner table sense. We're talking with people that we know or people that we've just met, but in a more artistic or elevated or practiced form, it is we who devote our lives to this art form, learning how to understand what you're telling us as we are presenting the narrative to you. So that we can shape that narrative to more tactfully and meaningfully reach you.
I think, yeah. And Borges said that the relationship between a teller and a listener is like that of tasting an apple. You don't know if the flavor's in the apple or in the mouth. And I think that relationship that you're talking about is that symbiotic relationship that needs to happen in a story. It needs both sides. Yeah, I love that when you say it. Yeah.
Both of you have very long, fabulous careers as storytellers. Can you talk a little bit about what is that community? What is that industry? How did you become storytellers? Because you sort of make a joke in your show that people are like, is that a job? So can you talk a little bit about the profession of storytelling? And how you started, how you both started?
You know, we know all the storytelling jokes and they're not funny to us anymore. So, you know, whenever a group of storytellers gets together, we tell that one, we tell the one, oh, so what book are you reading to us today? There's not a preschool here. You know, so I'm glad that you laughed when Peggy said that about Kevin's remark, because we don't laugh anymore. We kind of cry a little bit about it. So this, like a little bit of storytelling history and how I got into it and how he got into it. We have different ways, but you know, I am fortunate that in the US, we really have several generations of people who have worked as storytellers as a profession. And that goes back to the late 60s, the early 70s, and kind of the way that I think of it is like a post hippie movement. Where there was a movement of peace and love and music and drugs and togetherness and looking about how we're all the same. There was kind of this latent group of people, right? There were a group of people that had that a little bit later, and it was, let's do all that, but with folktales and talking about who we are and where we're from. And it was happening here and there around the country at the same time that a number of people were realizing the richness and treasury of the storytelling traditions they had inherited. And a catalyst for making this seem like something else was the creation of the National Storytelling Festival in the early 70s in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Jimmy Neal Smith was the person who conceived of this idea. He just passed away. And immediately after that, the creation of the National Storytelling Network. And then from the 70s through the time that I got into it, there, as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, there were several generations of people that tried to figure out how do we turn this into a bigger movement? How do we turn it into a career? And so when I came along into this world, having grown up here in West Virginia in a family of storytellers, I inherited lots and lots of stories that I heard from my great-grandparents. I knew 3 of my great-grandparents till I was in my early 20s, and 2 of my great-great-aunts, and they all told stories. And my great-uncles were great storytellers and so on. I had this inheritance that I didn't realize was important until actually I came to college here at Shepherd College. And took a course in Appalachian culture. And my professor encouraged me to do a research project on storytelling. And I got into, my entree was, I did a research project on a pair of brothers who had won the West Virginia Liars Contest collectively 11 times. And so I learned we have a storytelling contest here. I started to compete in it. And after a while, I got recognized and seen.
And you're one of those liars that won,
So
right?
I went on to become a 7-time place, finisher, a 4-time champion of that contest. And the storyteller, one of the brothers, had passed, and one is still alive. His name is Bill Lepp. He's a very famous storyteller from West Virginia. And he and his family saw me telling stories very early on and said, you should go to the National Storytelling Festival and see how people are using storytelling. It's a lot more than what happens right here in this tradition. being Appalachian, we have a strong tradition of tall tale telling here. And I went to the National Festival in 2006 for the first time. I've been every year since then. I'll be featured for the fourth time this October. And that was the beginning of my entry into this field as a profession. But like I said, I am really fortunate in that other people had already forged a path into making it a profession. One of those people is sitting here next to me.
Well, yeah, and I'm on a lot of the same coattails you were talking about. But I think a different way of looking at it is there's not just a job for a storyteller.
Mhm.
Every storytelling is a different job. And it really is, because you walk into the room and you're beholding to the moment, to the people that are in there. All these things come into play, and that's our job. I'm gonna jump into like the difference between theater, and maybe we're gonna come up to that, right? But
Well, that would be the next question, but go right ahead.
but I'll just touch on here, in a theater, you come in and you are a voyeur, you're looking through the fourth wall. As a storyteller, it's our job to make a connection and to create a system of trust. A storyteller, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, but for me, storytellers that I enjoy, I trust.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean you can't be a liar. Because when you know somebody's gonna lie, you trust them to lie. So it is a different kind of trust. When someone says once upon a time, you know what we're about, and so that
Yeah.
creates, even in that sentence, that creates a system of trust. So that is one of the things about being a storyteller. So when you say, is there a job? I remember I was coming back from North Dakota, the Bakken oil fields, and there was an oil worker sitting next to me, and I told him I was a storyteller. Here's one of those stories that doesn't make us happy. And I said, I was a storyteller. And he goes, you're a storyteller. And he goes, isn't that a dying art? And I said, yeah, but it's been trying to die for 4,000 years. And then I looked at him and I said, let's see which one of us has a job in 10 years. He was like, okay, yeah. So it is a job that Bill Harley, a friend of ours, talks so eloquently about. It's not a lot of times the art form, it's the seed of the art form. So stories are where it starts. Stories are the groundswell of it, the seed of what sometimes become a song, sometimes become a movie, sometimes. But our job is directly with the people. I love what you said about it being a conversation. And I was lucky. I grew up. My family we were good tellers, but we didn't know there was a job for it either. And until I was telling stories in a kitchen, and a producer of a theater said, do you want to do that on my stage next year? And I said, what? And she said, just what you did in my kitchen. So I was in their season the next year, just blabbing like I would in a kitchen. And then years later, after performing around the country in theaters, I found out there was a whole storytelling. I was in Cape Clear in Ireland,
Yeah.
and I saw Dubby Thomason, a good friend of ours, wonderful Oglala teller. And there's like, this is like an actual profession, and they were blowing me away. And I was like, I want to do that, because a storyteller was everything. They were the director, all these different things. But meanwhile, you're being all these things on this side, but inside the head of everyone out there, they are doing all the casting, the directing, the sets. Everything else is being formed. So what you're trying to do is conjure worlds, not words. Yeah, I don't know, I could blab for a while, so
We're storytellers, so
Excellent.
we'll talk.
So my next question is, can you talk a little bit about how you create, right? You just called this an art form. What inspires you, and how do you prepare, and how do you find something that you think, this is a good story I want to tell?
yeah.
Shall I jump in?
Do you wanna?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, go.
So I will pick up from my story just a minute ago. I quickly learned that we had someone from West Virginia telling a particular type of story, and he was very successful at it. And so I started to branch out into telling other types of stories than I would have at the West Virginia Liars Contest. And I realized that I had a mantle to pick up for traditional storytelling in Appalachia. And so I tell a lot of traditional stories that have lived here in the mountains for a really long time. And so I do a lot of archival research to find those, and a number of them just aren't worth telling right now. Or there's some problems with them that are, and also I believe that stories have a life and some of them just die naturally. But others I think are really cool and like should be told, like really cool wonder stories and journey tales. And I love spooky stories. And so when I come across a really cool one, so there's a lot of material out there that I like to work with already. I'm a big fan of 20th century and 21st century visual art. And Jasper Johns is one of my heroes. And something that I learned from him is you don't have to start from scratch. You can take an image that people already know and then work with it from there. And already some of the job is done for you. And so I feel like I have that approach when I work with traditional story. I'm just putting it into a very contemporary setting. And for me, usually the story says, I'm a good one. The moment that I hear it from someone or hear it in a sound archive or happen to read it. I also create a lot of my own stories. And this is the other part of your question, I think. I am always thinking about the stories that need to be told in contemporary Appalachia. And I think I'm the person to do it. And, a lot of trust has been placed in me, a lot of training. Kevin mentioned Dovey Thomason. Dovey is my mentor. Even though she is Lakota and Apache, I am not. But we both come from communities that have stories told about us by other people. And part of our work is to fix that problem when the stories are incorrect. And so I feel like part of my work as an artist is to develop stories that need to be told about people in Appalachia that don't have stories, or their stories weren't perpetuated, or they're just not part of the hegemony and don't have the power to share them. Right. And so then I take a very cinematic approach. I thought I would be a film scorer in life. And so I went to school, and after here, I was here for 2 years and went to some other schools and studied film analysis and how to write music for movies. And all of that really influences how I construct a story. And in fact, a lot of the things you were saying about casting, and I think about camera work and camera placement, and how to convey ideas to an audience through conversation so that they do a lot of that work and build it. Like how you said, they're doing the casting, right? And I can speak a whole lot more about that, but I also want to cede the floor to Kevin because I'll take the rest of the time.
Okay, wait, go back. What was the question again? I asked myself an Adam's.
How do you create, or what inspires you, or how do you find something that makes a new story for you?
Well, there's one of the things is you have thresholds in your life, and you have these things that are like, or things that crack me up. And I'll go, where did that come from? Where does that sit in a story? What we a lot of times in the business call the aha moment. But where is the aha moment? Is it what starts the whole thing tumbling? Does it come usually 3/4 the way through and you're building to that? And how does it happen? So a lot of times the creation of it is something will happen in my life, or something that I'll learn about is that aha moment. And then I'm fascinated with what surrounded that and how did we get there? I want to address, because when you're talking about you and Dovey coming from traditional stories, I didn't come from traditional stories. And I come from, there's a wave in America that isn't many other places in the world of personal stories. And people are in a lot of traditional, we're much more accepted here than other countries. Other countries are pretty disparaging about the profession, about personal stories, even though they're slowly doing them. So what happened to me though is my heritage is Irish, but I'm not an Irish storyteller. So that's not really, I moved away from there. I wouldn't be considered an Irish storyteller. I'm not, and where I live, this isn't my land where I live in Minnesota. This isn't, the spirits of this earth aren't my spirit. When I go back to Scotland and Ireland, I feel the spirits in the ground. If you've ever gone back to where your people come from, something shoots through you vertically. That is like a living thing, that this is my landscape. I sometimes refer to the oniric space, the Greeks used to call it, which was a space where dream and reality came together. And it was, and everybody in here has it. You're either an ocean person, a mountain person, a desert person. Everyone can relate to a landscape in here. And I believe that that goes back to something in your ancestry where that was your landscape. So the landscape in Minnesota, even though I love it so much, that isn't my home. So what do I do if I want to be a storyteller? I have to enter the world that's called personal storytelling. And so that's what we do. And we've created a form like we did in America, how we created jazz, how we created all these different art forms. I feel the personal story is something that America has given to the pantheon of storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's, and I even go back because there's these stories of, you know, O'Sheen and all these different, I was in Ireland and they were saying, but our stories go back all these years. And I'm like, well, give my story of riding in the back of the station wagon 800 years. It's going to be pretty good. It's when it goes through these, you know, these different forms and different tellers, then our personal, and I go, every story you tell was one day a personal story, wasn't it? Well, yes. I go, okay. So we're at the cusp of that. So yeah.
Can I say two more things?
Of course.
Okay, you know, Kevin made me think of two things, and so I'm gonna just narrative converse. You know, I was in Australia earlier this summer at the Sydney International Storytelling Conference, and they had brought me to represent Appalachia. I was keynoting this conference, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. I can tell all these traditional stories with these storytellers. And almost every one of them told a personal story.
Oh.
It was a total surprise to me.
Hmm.
Yeah, anyway, that's a little commentary that we'll talk about later. Going back to the early thing that you said in that part of the response, I'm working on this long set of stories. Actually, if you come Tuesday, I'm telling a story from this set. I call it the Appalachian 20th Century. And it's, I'm inspired by August Wilson, the Pittsburgh Cycle. So each of these stories is a program length tale that is set in a different decade of 20th century in Appalachia, and looks at a character who doesn't have a story told about them. Okay, so I'm telling one of them on Tuesday, but I'm working on one of them right now that I hope to premiere next year. This is getting back to your initial question. And each of these stories retells two world tales of some sort. So this one is set in the 1970s. It's the main character is called Maddie Sue, and she is from the family in the small town in the hills who has always owned the mortuary. Okay, and she doesn't want to do that as her job, although she's the next generation for it. This story is retelling Medusa as one of its two stories. Maddie Sue is Medusa. Okay, and but what she wants to do is this brand new thing. She's a Tupperware salesman. And the little spark hits you, like Kevin was saying, today, as I was driving here I've been working somewhere else this week. As I was driving home today, it occurred to me, this idea of putting something in a little Tupperware is going to be this wonderful parallel to putting someone in a casket.
Oh.
Kevin's coming to hear you.
And in the creative process, if we just like, I think we're both similar in this, that we have these ideas and we just play with them, and we're both, I think, pretty cerebral people. And as we just think about them, it's about being open to ideas that come across your brain and out in the universe. And that one, I think, is going to be a game changer for this story.
Okay, I gotta tell a quick one on August.
Okay.
So do you know August Wilson, the playwright? Do you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he came to Minnesota to work at the Playwright Center, and his early plays, the coolest thing, August would read his plays the first time by himself. And so you never missed a first reading, and then he would never read it ever again. And so you would hear his first reading and the poetry, he read it like a poet. And it would always remind me of why Shakespeare called himself a poet, because when August read, you just lost. He was the best. I mean, oh my gosh, you couldn't. Yeah, August was amazing. But what I knew him for, he was on my softball team, and He wear Pittsburgh Pirate uniforms, and everyone's out there in their jean shorts, going, oh, geez, you know? And he's got a full Pittsburgh Pirate uniform, and he could hit it over the fence, and I'm going, Andy can write? I'd ask him.
Okay. So now I actually want to turn this conversation over to you in a way, because, and I'll ask you two to answer in a minute, but you know, here we are at the Contemporary American Theater Festival, and one of our core values is to tell fearless stories, right? And so my question for you, because I know many of you have seen some of the plays already, is there a difference between theater and storytelling as they have been talking about it? Or are there more similarities between them? And I am curious to hear what you think about that first. Anybody have any thoughts? Yes.
Well, Peggy, I have a question for you before I can answer that. I don't know how your plays are selected, but I'm assuming people apply to be on this and you have a reading group and you selected these. If my next question won't be valid if that's not true.
Well, it's not exactly the way it works. We do not have a committee or a group of people that read the plays. It's pretty much me. And that we receive scripts from all different places. So we get them from literary agents, we get them from individual playwrights, we get them from other reading series across the country. And once it gets to a certain point within, you know, maybe 20 some scripts, then we sit together as a staff and figure out the puzzle, right? Because we have so much money to hire so many people and to produce so much work. And so all of that has to fit. Plus, you know, supporting our values, telling diverse stories, representation on stage, all of those things go into the puzzle. And so yes and no, sort of about the way it's done.
Because then when you saw Kevin's play story for this week, you obviously didn't say no. You said, no, that's not a play, so you kind of made a conscious decision to make it part of the mix. So you kind of answered your own question.
Well, I know why I did it, but I'm curious about what you all think about it.
But and we've had a lot of discussion since we saw it today, and I personally think it fits in the scenario. But for Kevin, I was thinking, you tell a lot of stories, but your story today is a very poignant point for a very specific community. And I can see, and maybe you do, taking it to a lot of different communities that really would benefit from that story that today, I mean, it was very profound and it certainly made me think things differently. And I'm just saying, I think that to me, I would think you would use it in different ways besides just as a theater presentation.
Yeah, I would, I mean, I do, and I would, and parts of it are, but I have to say, I'm basking in this theatrical experience. This is like a dream come true for me, to combine my theater past with a storytelling nearer past. And then and Rob Whitmer's in the audience, who just brings a world. And to have the theatrical, the amazing sets and the amazing lighting and sound, it's just, it enhances it in a different way. But yeah, there's the story that's just the storyteller, and I relish that as well. But you know, why not? I always think of musical theater as that kind of hybrid, and then this is this kind of hybrid. This is story, but to me, it's theater. It's really, I love the theatricality of getting to do this and presenting it, just what those elements add. It's just, it creates a whole nother experience for an audience when those, all of our elements come together.
Yeah.
As a playwright myself, I've come late to the profession. I think of Thomas Wolfe's statement that each of us is all the sums he has not counted, that growing up, all the stories we absorb. So most recent play I've written is about a Marine returning from Vietnam. I know nothing about it, but there's something I somehow intuited things. And so I guess I'm saying that this stories don't have to be known as a specific story, the story about X, Y, or Z, to lead somebody to create a new story, kind of like a patchwork quilt. I mean, that makes sense?
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's.
Yeah, so if you didn't hear that, it was a statement about how sometimes a story that has been told can also lead you to the idea of creating other stories that you may not have ever heard or know, right? And this is from a playwright, so, yeah. Other comments, questions, go back.
I have one on Zoom too.
Oh, Zoom, okay, great, let's do Beth and then we'll go Zoom.
You know, I have the pleasure of living here, so I've seen that and moved it. And I've always thought of your storytelling as being theater. I've never thought.
So this is someone that is saying that they've always thought of the storytelling, particularly of Adam, as being
And
theater.
sometimes what you are doing is more theater because there's more add-ons in the way of costume or whatever, but it. So I understand your question, but I've never thought of, I've experienced Adam as a storyteller more than I've experienced anybody else, because we're fortunate enough to have him here. And I've never, he brings other people too, he's not the only one, but that I've experienced, but I've never thought of it as anything different, except it just doesn't have enough the staking that you talked about, and sometimes it doesn't have a whole lot of extra stuff. I like it in some ways, it's like a play reading, and I love play readings from the perspective of not being distracted by the other wonderful things that are going on, like the set and the lighting and the whatever, so. I'm
Yes.
surprised by the question.
Okay, well, this is a good question. We're gonna, I know you guys are really itching to answer this, but we're gonna get there. Let's go to Zoom and get that question and we'll come back.
Yeah, Susan says a one-man play can have different actors, but these storytellers can't be replaced by other actors. So doesn't that make it different?
Oh, that's a good idea. Go through that.
Mysterious.
Who else hasn't thought about this yet? Yes, you.
Good.
Hi, everyone. So I actually think there's almost like a hierarchy, not in the sense of better or just where things flow. So it's all, are trying to communicate with each other and kind of mind meld in some way. And that storytelling, there's multiple ways to communicate, but storytelling almost sit in some ways at the top of that type of hierarchy for other ways that you might, you need to start with the story. And so in order to have good theater, there's a story, right? And that theater may be more about the way that it's being presented and you're using maybe different modalities, sometimes more simplistic, sometimes a little more complicated. Which then speaks to what you were saying, Carol, about like musical theater, right? And there's more things going on. And I know that, for example, next week, we'll be having another theater festival in part because I have friends that are friends in the Berkshires. Going already, right? If you aren't, well, you don't come here again next year. But they're doing a bunch of Tennessee Williams stuff. And one of the things that they're doing, one of the reasons I'm going, is that they're actually putting Tennessee Williams on us.
On Ice, that's right.
Exactly, a skating show and another way of telling the
That's
story.
right, that's right.
A lot of, it becomes vehicles, the storytelling, please,
Right.
I mean, that's so, and, yeah.
So you feel like the story is at the top of the hierarchy?
It's a little bit more top hierarchy.
Yeah.
You can go a lot of different ways with it from there.
Great, that's great. Yes.
If you had music, did you want to go? If you use music as an animal, you have to respect for kinds of music. There's printed music on a page, and one can make one's life committed for them to do that well. Read music off the page and make a presentation of that. 70 artists, classical music as well. Theaters. There's another kind of music that's a function of a different process completely. And it's when it's more interactive, creative, that's jazz. Because it's spontaneous. And I guess my question is, how much of what you guys do is in niches that are totally spontaneous? Or does that goes into the category of being a comedian? It can.
Yeah, so the
George
question,
Carlin was that way.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful storyteller.
so the question is, a referencing sort of music and the idea of music that's written and created and written down,
Yes.
and that of jazz, which is spontaneous and often improvisational. And so in your work as storytellers, is it spontaneous, improvisational?
What's the
Sometimes,
most fun stuff you do? Is that spontaneous stuff, or is it worked out and delivered in a way that really gets the job done?
my funnest stuff depends as much on the audience as what I've done. So when something connects, however it connects, because I work like jazz, most of my stories are told before they're written. So I don't come from the page to the story, I come from the story to the page. So at one point, they're really like jazz.
So it's a framework.
Yeah, it is. But I love your musical reference because I think of music as stories. I think they are another form of stories. So, yeah, I love that. I love that you put it that way.
And I can attest to what Kevin is saying, because he has promised that we'll have a script for this show by the end of the season.
I mean, for most of us, that's when the magic happens. The real art happens when you know something's being created right in front of you.
Yeah.
Things that are rehearsed and done well, that's impressive. But it doesn't have the same effect as when you're really creating it. And I'm asking, is that the intent each time you tell a story to recreate it almost brand new for us?
Yes, so it's difficult to not answer the larger question but I'm only gonna focus on this. That's expanding upon what I meant when I said it's narrative conversation. As I'm conversing with you, using a story to do that, I'm noticing what needs to be flexible, what needs to be changed, and how you receive story. And there is always room for improvisation, for, no matter how well you know a story, you can storytelling allows us to switch, to change, to react to how you react. I mean, some of the best, like, there's lots of funny storytelling, and some of the best humorous moments that I've ever witnessed in my life is when the storyteller observed how the audience responded and then improvised several things, and sometimes several times in a row, or called back an element like that from earlier in a story that an audience really responded to, that maybe we've never done that before in another telling of that story. It just worked in that moment, in this venue, with those people, because it's narrative conversation. You're conversing with us as we're having the narrative between us.
When you do these festivals and things, and it's a group of you.
Yeah.
And you're weighing that back and forth. You have that improvisation with multiple people. With
Yeah.
one person's enough. But
Yep.
do you get like a band of storytellers?
Yeah. When we do a festival together, where you fall in the order, you have a job. And it's an odd thing. If you're the first story, you're you're creating a trust for the entire evening. When you're the second teller, you're kind of setting the ball up, but you can do that in a really great way. Then, each storyteller, as we get older, we learn how to work that part of a festival where we are. So we work I mean, we all have giant egos, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, we want the evening to go better than our personal story. We want this entire experience to go great. I have to say, to reference a part of what you said earlier, part of the genius of Adam is he takes what we see as traditional forms and makes them feel improvisational of the moment. And to me, that is a whole, when you see a great traditional teller like Adam, you're seeing somebody that knows how to take a form and make it live in the very moment where you are. So he's doing a combination of what you're talking about, but also taking a story that we know is important, a question, because a story will die when its question is answered. And so in a traditional form, you're taking a question that still lives. Some of my favorite stories, the Anishinaabe, a First Nation group where I live, their language is 87% verbs. So nothing that they talk about is a noun. It's all verbs. So a spider is never called a spider. A spider is weaving nets when it's weaving a net. It's a capture when it's doing, so in a story, everything is what it's doing. And so people will know the traditional form, everyone will know the story they're telling, but the way they tell it. And it was the same in the ancient Greeks. The Greeks knew all about the gods they were gonna tell about, but what are you bringing to that God that we don't know? So that improvisational factor is still pretty strong.
Great, we got a question right here. And you have another Zoom question? Okay, we'll go here and then back to Zoom. Go.
It's being done for the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country in the way of storytelling, because it's such a wonderful art form. It brings people together. Everybody can relate to it, but yet we don't see it. I mean, Jonesboro, yes, we tried it in Loudoun County and were successful for 2 years, and then people can't stop coming. And so we didn't have storytelling, but it was just a fabulous summer, distraction where you can bring the kids, because the stores are usually clean. We're not using the F-bomb. I mean, why everybody's getting so upset, political, but, the loss of Stephen Colbert is nothing the way he left it. It's not storytelling. He's not a comedian. He's not getting anything across that we can all relate to. So has the committee contacted you in any way to do something with storytelling?
So this is a question about celebrating the 250th anniversary. And is storytelling a part of that celebration?
Sure.
Yeah, I've already been contacted in Minnesota. I'll be doing stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it going to be televised? Is it going to be?
I hope not.
She asked if it was gonna be televised.
I love it when people are there. And, to quote Yogi Berra, if people don't want to come, you can't stop them.
That's a long way from here.
Do you have a question on Zoom?
Yeah, Taylor F says, I see theater as a way to make stories more immersive. To bring out different aspects of both new and traditional stories so that you can see them come to life in a new light. I feel like anytime you tell a story, you choose what aspects to focus on. And what you choose to focus on when it's being performed on stage might be different than when it is being read on paper or presented by a storyteller.
So talking about theater being a more immersive experience of the storytelling. Okay, I'm gonna let you answer now.
Go, bye.
So what is your position on the answer to this question? Is storytelling theater or no?
Sure, to go first.
I don't know how to answer, because I don't know, I think in terms of what I'm doing, I've always thought of what I do is what I do, and I don't know how to put words to that. I mean, the last people that want to call, I still appreciate what you said, by the way. I didn't mean to disparage it, because I agree with everything you said about trying to get it out there and but the last thing, I mean, everyone calls themselves storytellers, novelists, movie makers, a great storyteller, except for storytellers, because then no one comes. And so it's the weirdest backlash in the world. It's like, we're the last people to call ourselves what we are, because then people they will make an assumption about it. It's like Adam was talking, they think, are we reading for kids? Are we doing something? They don't know the expanse, and exactly what you were talking about. They don't know the expanse of it. Sorry, jump in, Adam.
If I took 100 tubes of paint and squeezed them out right here into a mound, is it a painting or is it a sculpture? I mean, that's kind of how I approach it. They have similar, there's plenty that's similar and there's plenty that's different, and two different viewers could argue it's different. My favorite living painter right now is Micheline Thomas. And she makes these gorgeous canvases that aren't even canvas, and these huge paintings, but she puts rhinestones all over them and sequins, and there's shellac and enamel. And it's like, is it a painting? Or does it have to have paint to be a painting? Or does it have to be all paint to be a painting? And I mean, I think the same thing can be said for is storytelling theater. There's got to be some sort of rule, like a square and a rectangle and a square for storytelling and theater. And a lot of it is giving the audience just as much position as the storyteller. You know, we are very different storytellers. We tell stories. They're very different types of stories, but we're both storytellers. And we would agree that what we present are stories, but there's also theatrical elements to them. But at the same point, everybody out there experiencing it is a storier, and they get to make the decision on as to what is happening up there also. It's not just us who gets to make that decision, you know? It's everybody out there who's saying, well, that was a story. No, it was more theater, like Beth is saying, you know? Yeah, it's
Yeah, we have a lot of questions.
I gotta jump in, because here's a little, you can always tell a storyteller that was an actor before they were a storyteller. Because an actor will want the house lights out and storytellers want the house lights out. And you can always tell, okay, that was an actor. It's like when your plane's landing, you can always tell a Navy pilot because they slam on the brakes like they used to on an aircraft and carrier, you know, anyway. It's not exactly.
Let's go read and then we'll go to Renee. Yeah.
You both talked about an audience response, and when I saw your play, when you finished the story, I thought, well, should we applaud? I felt the audience wanted to, almost like with a musical, you applaud after each song is completed, but we didn't do that. Does that make a difference to you?
Not in the
Would
least.
you want that, or would that break the?
Either one, I don't know. It doesn't, because it doesn't break the flow of the show.
Okay.
So either way, it's just absolutely fine.
Well, I just really wanted to applaud.
Well, Rob and I work on that. One of the things we work on is, where do we not want it to happen though?
Right.
There's a lot of places where it doesn't matter, but there's several places, like at the end of the song, at the end, we don't want people to think that it's over. We don't want people to applaud. So I jump in there fast. And there's times when Rob, when we work with Rob, oh my gosh, he can take a story and connect it to the next story with music, and that will make the story flow into the next story. Or he can put a button on it, and then that can sometimes elicit applause too. So yeah, you know, Rob works with the musicality of the piece.
But you can come and see it again and you can applaud. So, well, I'm sure you'll start other people. So, Renee.
I really appreciate your references to indigenous people, indigenous cultures. And I have to be honest, when I first heard your play this evening, I thought it was a comedy show. And I had to put myself into, is this storytelling? Is this the theater? There's theatrical things on the stage. And then as it went along, I agree with you. I wanted to clap every time you finished. But I felt like you were cultural carriers, like, and the indigenous culture, the stories are part of the oral story, the oral history. That's part of the culture. So do you see yourself as an entertainer, a storyteller entertainer, or are you a cultural carrier or cultural protector of something?
A little of both. I think that the entertainment is important to bring people in. And so I think the entertainment is an important aspect. But I remember when someone asked one time the difference between a comedian and a storyteller. A comedian closes the door with a joke, and a storyteller opens the door with a joke. Because when we laugh, we're family. Laughter is not universal, it's really specific. So when we laugh, we're family. And now that we're family, I can get to some of the harder things that we have to talk about, because now we're together. So I think a little bit of both.
I think you were also a self-help book.
Oh.
Great. Carolyn?
I have a question for Kevin. You have been a storyteller for Speak Story series here. And I'm interested in your creative process for this production as opposed to coming here to tell stories. How was that different for you, or was it?
It's different because this I wanted to have a structure, and I don't know if I would call it a theatrical structure, but it is a structure of threads, that these invisible threads, that it relies on the form that this is in, which I consider it is a theatrical form. this would be a very different play if I was to do it strictly as a storyteller. Which, it would just be, it would be a different experience. Both how I would create it and how, but these are stories that I do tell as stories, but I use them really differently in an evening or it just, I wanted there to be a theatrical through line in this piece. And I'm still struggling with it, but I'm hoping it's getting closer.
And I think also bringing in the director. 'cause
Oh,
you
yeah,
worked-
crucial.
You worked at a point where they did some workshop time with the director and with Rob, so that there was a collaboration on this that's probably a little different than what you do in preparation to story.
Yeah, Adam knows, you know, when you create an evening of stories, the threads are still invisible, but it's you know. I mean, yeah, you're a mess. I can't wait for Tuesday.
Yes, question.
You know, Emerson said the ancestor to every action is a thought. So when I heard Peggy's initial question and I took it back to your performance, when I saw it, it was like, well, the question is, storytelling is the ancestor to most of the art forms that I know. My impression initially, as I have attended your performance, I loved it, by the way, and that's why I'm going to Minnesota to your other
Yeah.
play. Was this is a combination of a skilled stand-up comedian, a skilled storyteller, and an actor, all combined under this tent of storytelling. You can't have theater without storytelling. You don't have music without storytelling. Storytelling is that ancestor to so much of the arts. So, you know,
She's saying that storytelling is the ancestor to so much of the arts. And she was also saying that Kevin is a skilled stand-up comedian, a skilled storyteller, and a skilled actor in his performance. Yes. Yeah.
I think this question is wonderful, but it's a trick question. But yes to everything, because yes, the more you know about the arts or anything, language limits our actual depth of experience. Because we have this concept of our perspectives and our experience, words, language limits us. All theory about don't go up to the stars. That's what moves us so much. So when you combine these talents and the definitions of them, are they this or the jazz? That's what stirs us. And I was writing down the people I thought were storytellers, the great ones. They are, I don't know if they're great, but I'll never forget when I first heard Rosie O'Donnell at the mic. Talking about her family. What a storyteller, I thought. Sure, maybe someone translate that, some of the dramas and plays of storytelling, like we do in Shakespeare in Love. So you know it's all a trick question, and that's why it's all beautiful. It's whenever we say how much we know, and it's the ability to in this audience, like I can talk to her all night. Audience, I have to forget that you're here. Just, and also I'm forgetting what I want to say half the time sometimes, you know, what to say. Get excited about it, but yes, it's a wonderful question. Yes, it's all of it. And that's why we were moved by your play and by other plays today, and why we want to have input into them. Oh, this way and that way, depending on our backgrounds. That's why it's so beautiful to be together in that, as someone has depicted it, the dark theater and sharing this experience together. I don't know how many of us were crying as recently at your play, but I felt that the whole, everyone was crying. It was so moving. So, yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's a trick question. That's why we're enjoying participating in it, depending on our background. Some of us are very smart and express themselves so well. It's joy to listen to you all, to be able to do this. So that's wonderful.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's less important, the exact art form, than the fact that it is a dialectic. There is no story with one person. It's when that second person arrives that the story begins. And whether you're drawing it or painting it and telling the story that way or singing it like the epics for thousands of years, or they're there. And it's a dynamic thing, it's something that you tell that it touches something in us that is familiar.
Yeah. So partly talking about when you tell the story and there's a second person that receives and is a part of that experience too. Yeah. And yes.
So I'm tasked every week with telling a story, some call it preaching. I'm fascinated with what I think the way you said it was when there's an answer, you don't need a story. Because I find it as the different ways that people approach the scriptures, the ancient scriptures that we're supposed to interpret, invite people into to embody in their lives. And yet some people, it's almost a dead document, because this is the answer and it's the only thing you can do with it, rather than inviting us into the questions. So I'm really interested in hearing more and thinking more about how we say that to people, teach people that. As a way to approach scripture, as a way to approach any of the ancient writings, so.
I think, yeah, the scriptures are all questions. I mean, they're just, well, you know, yeah, you know. That's, yeah,
This is one of the great storytellers.
and questioners, yeah.
Questions.
I don't know.
Good. Yes, we're gonna take one last question and then I'm gonna wrap it up with these two. Yeah.
So to the point that I think Susan online made about, you know, as a play where it could be acted by maybe everyone, but a story needs to be told by this one person. I've been thinking about Anthony's song, which I think was from a
Antonio song.
I'm sorry, Antonio's song that was from a few years ago. That was a personal story, and also did my grandfather kill my grandfather, which I didn't know if the person when I first saw it was the person whose story it was, or if it was an actor cast to tell that story. So I just wonder, it's brought up a question in my mind, whereas for you, Kevin, I feel like your story, it's your story and no one else could be telling it. But yet I still think Did My Grandfather Kill My Grandfather is also a story, and it's storytelling, but it's also a play, and perhaps somebody else could be cast to tell that story. So I just wonder what people think now, having seen in this season, you know, at least two personal accounts told by the person who experienced them and written by the person who experienced them, where it becomes even blurrier in some ways.
I wonder what you think of that, Ab, because part of the art form of a story is what we bring to it. That might not be able to be passed on. What do you think of that one?
I can speak very personally to it. I mean, over my career, I've had a number of people contact me to say, can I tell this story of yours? And it's like, you know, about my grandparents and interacting with me as a child. And I usually say, no, you can't. And it's not that I'm not giving you permission, it's just that it's not your story, you know? But the other side of that is, what is your story? Why would you want to tell mine? You have a story, yeah, right. But in that case, you know, but I don't know if I can speak immediately. I will think about it for a while, but about in like your case or the, who's the playwright for Did My Grandfather?
Cody Leroy.
Oh, Cody's case, yeah.
He wants other people to bring
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's how I would feel about storytelling in general. I came from a background of an Eastern European family. And you talk about storytelling, you know, I grew up with Baba Yaga and
Yeah.
everything else.
Mhm.
And each person who would tell those ancient stories had a different twist on it.
Sure.
The family stories, each person who told the family story had different insight. And of course, as a psychologist and as an adult, I understand that. And it really, it's a wonderful thing to see it from different perspectives, the same experience. And that to me is how another person telling your story would be.
It is, and something I can say to further my answer is that I feel that way about my personal stories, but my original stories that are, I mean, my personal stories are original, but my original stories that are folkloric, my dream is that people would tell those stories. And that's something that has been strongly taught to me. Like I take that directly from Dovey. Like we have this hope that we could be so immersed in our tradition that we would be the person of this generation to make the new stories in that tradition, and that we would know the tradition so well that when people experience them, they would think it's always been part of the folklore and would retell those stories. What an honor to be able to create a story that would enter out into the world of orature and live for its time. That I would love. And in that case, I've had a number of people ask me, can I tell that story? And in those, yes. I have this story that I tell about a person who becomes a heron and flies away as a true form. And I told this story just a few weeks ago, and afterwards several people from a large group said, is it okay if we tell this story to other people? And I said, you're supposed to. Yes, please.
One last question. Anybody have a last question? Yes.
So building off of what you were talking about personal stories, so I guess my question is, when the storyteller, specifically about personal stories, when that storyteller leaves the world, passes away, what happens to that personal story? Is there value like at that point in someone else telling it, or because of the connection that you have to it, does the story kind of just go back?
This is a question that actually speaks to a larger issue of appropriation, and I mean we could scale back on that question. I'm immediately thinking of Baba Jamal Khorram, a storyteller who just passed away, and as our friend and colleague Elizabeth Ellis says, you know, when a storyteller dies, it's as if a whole library is burned down. And Baba Jamal, he had so many stories that only he told, and only he told that way. And does that mean we should tell those stories? Does it mean that we should tell the stories of him telling them? Does it mean that we should tell them and say, I learned it or I heard it from? And right now my answer is, I don't know.
I think there's another thing you can pass besides the stories. When a kid comes up and wants to do what I do, now I've just passed it on. I didn't pass the story on, but I passed the art form on. Or when somebody comes up and they, like Adam's the generation behind me, they're telling stories different than my generation did, just like I told stories different than the ones. And so it's so great to see the next generation, because I go, oh, we didn't wreck it. Because they come in and they add to the pantheon. I've added what I can to the art form. It's not my job to like send my art form down. It's my job to send, like, to continue it, to like put in what I can to the art form. And then the next generation, it isn't about telling my stories, it's passing the art form along.
And then we try to destroy it.
Yeah. You're not doing a good job.
Please join me in thanking Kevin and Adam. And I just want to remind you that Adam will be performing on Tuesday, so if you'd like to see him do his storytelling, and of course, Kevin has another week of shows here as well. I thank you all for being here, and we are excited to have you at the Festival of Summer. Thank you for coming.